Rain came down in straight, cold lines, turning the wrought iron gate into a black ribcage shining under floodlights. On the other side of the bars, a child stood on the slick asphalt, with her hood pulled tight, water dripping off the tip of her nose. She did not cry. She did not wave her arms. She simply raised her hand and knocked 3 times on the small, bulletproof window of the security booth, like she had done it before, like she had practiced the courage in private. Inside the booth, a guard with a clipped haircut looked up from his monitors, irritation already forming in the set of his mouth. He tapped a button, and the intercom hissed to life. "No soliciting," he said, voice flat. "Move along." The child leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. She held up an envelope in a small fist. Even through the rain, the paper looked protected, kept dry against her chest. Wax sealed the flap with a thumbprint pressed into it like a promise. "It's for him," she said. Her voice was quiet, not pleading. Elias Thorne. The guard's eyes narrowed, and his hand drifted toward the door latch, not to let her in, but to step out and end the nuisance. Behind him, on one of the screens, the main house rose like a lit ship on a hill stone walls, warm windows, perfect angles. A fortress built to keep everything out. In the top floor office of that house, Elias Thorne watched the gate camera feed without blinking. He had built this world for one, every desire met before it became a want, every risk anticipated and neutralized. And yet his chest felt hollow as a vacant ballroom. He should have turned away from the screen. He should have let his system handle it. That was the point of systems. But the child lifted her wrist as she shifted her grip on the envelope, and a thin bracelet slid down toward her hand, cheap metal, worn smooth, holding a single small charm shaped like a star. Elias's fingers tightened around the edge of his desk. He didn't know who she was. Down at the gate, the guard shoved open the booth door, rain gusting in. "You think this is funny?" he snapped, stepping toward her, boots splashing. "You don't just say that name." The child did not step back. She stood her ground, eyes steady, face pale under the hood. "I'm not joking," she said. "I just need to give it to him. Then I'll go." In Elias's office, a second monitor displayed the inside of his house. Marble halls, silent art, security nodes, staff moving like shadows. Everything orderly, everything controlled. His empire was a clock until this moment. He pressed the button on his desk that connected him directly to the head of security. "Bring her in," Elias said. A beat of silence came through the speaker, like someone had misheard. "Sir," the head of security said carefully. "That's not." "Bring her in," Elias repeated, voice low and unmistakably final. "And if anyone touches her, they're done." On the gate camera, the guard froze as his earpiece crackled. The child's hand stayed on the envelope. Rain ran down her sleeve, a small hand, a sealed letter, a star charm catching the light. Elias's throat tightened with a sensation he had not allowed in years, a feeling that something was about to explode. He had no idea that one small visitor, with no weapon and no ransom demand, and no agenda he could quantify, was about to dismantle walls built by billions. And by morning, the man who owned the fortress would learn the true cost of keeping everyone out. The guard's posture shifted from aggression to reluctant obedience. He didn't apologize. Men like him rarely did. He just pointed toward a smaller side gate and barked, "This way," as if allowing her to move was mercy. The child walked without hesitation, shoes squeaking on wet pavement, her envelope pressed to her chest, like it was the only warm thing she had. She passed beneath cameras that could read pores on skin, past sensors buried in stone and could detect pressure changes. And still she looked less like a threat than a question the world had forgotten to answer. At the bottom of the hill, the side entrance weighted steel keypad, a vestibule designed to trap intruders between locked doors. The guard ushered her inside, keeping a hand close to his belt, eyes scanning for movement that wasn't there. Another guard appeared, taller, broader, wearing a black jacket with an earpiece and a look that had been trained into him, suspicion as default. "What is this?" the second guard muttered, glancing at the child as if she was a stray animal tracked in by accident. The child's chin lifted. "I'm not a stray," she said, voice still quiet. still controlled. "I'm a person," the taller guard snorted. "Sure." The first guard held up a hand to hush him. "Orders," he said, and that single word carried the weight of the house's invisible hierarchy. Orders from the man upstairs. The inner door clicked open, and warmth spilled out heat that smelled faintly of lemon polish and clean stone. The child stepped across the threshold, dripping rain onto an immaculate mat, leaving dark footprints on the pale surface. A woman appeared in the hall beyond house staff, mid-50s, hair in a neat twist, an expression caught between alarm and duty. Her eyes went immediately to the child's wet clothes, then to the guards, then down the corridor as if expecting Elias to materialize. "Where is he?" the child asked. The woman's lips parted. Thorne doesn't." She stopped herself because the guards were there, and they were already tense, and the house was a place where unfinished sentences could become problems. In the office upstairs, Elias watched her stand in his corridor under the chandelier's soft light. The camera's clarity made the scene too intimate. Water clung to her lashes. Her hands were red from cold. She stood in the center of his perfect hall like a drop of ink in milk. He should have felt anger at the disturbance. That was what he usually felt when his environment deviated from plan. But what he felt instead was something more dangerous: curiosity. He left his desk. His office was designed to impress people who were rarely allowed inside. Dark wood, a wall of glass facing the black, rainy expanse of the Hudson Valley, shelves of books, chosen as much for symbolism as content. The chair behind his desk was a throne disguised as furniture. He walked out without his blazer, the cuff of his shirt unbuttoned, as if he'd forgotten to finish the armor. The hallway outside his office was silent, except for the distant hush of rain against thick glass. Elias moved with the measured stride of someone used to rooms parting for him. As he descended the stairs, he saw the child from above, a small figure beneath the chandelier, flanked by men who looked like they wanted to erase her presence. She looked up, not startled, not intimidated, just looking. He felt something shift, like a lock turning on a door he had sealed years ago. When he reached the bottom step, the guards snapped straighter. The woman in staff uniform stepped aside. The child did not. Elias stopped a few feet from her, leaving space the way one might leave space around a wild animal, careful not to trigger flight or attack. He looked at her face. 9, maybe. 10 at most. Thin, but not frail. A bruised yellow shadow on one cheek, as if life had already reached for her and missed, barely. His eyes dropped to the envelope. The child lifted it slightly. "This is for you," she said. Her voice was even. No trembling, no desperate crescendo. It made the moment more unsettling than any scream. Elias's mouth was dry. "What's your name?" The child watched him for a beat, as if deciding whether names mattered in a house like this. "Leela," she said. Lila Rowan. The last name landed without recognition. That should have soothed him. Instead, it made him more uneasy. He extended his hand slowly. "May I?" Leela did not hand it over immediately. She studied his palm, his fingers clean, unmarked, the hands of a man who signed papers that moved billions. Then she placed the envelope in his hand carefully, like setting something fragile on a shelf. "Don't open it in front of them," she said, eyes flicking toward the guards. The head of security arrived then, as if summoned by trouble itself. Felix Rourke was built like a door, and wore his authority the way other men wore cologne. His eyes went from Lila to Elias, and hardened. "Sir," Felix said, voice low, "we need to remove her. Now, this is a breach." Elias didn't look away from the child. "She's not a breach," he said, and the words felt strange in his mouth, like speaking a language he had forgotten. "She's wet. Get her something warm." Felix's jaw tightened. "We don't know who she is." Lila's eyes narrowed slightly. "He asked," she said, and there was steel under the softness. "I told him." Felix ignored her, focusing on Elias. This could be a setup. People have tried worse. Elias held the envelope and felt the wax seal beneath his thumb. It wasn't branded with a crest or a corporate mark. It was a thumbprint human intimate. His gaze dropped to Lila's wrist again. The bracelet had slipped down, star charm dangling. He saw faint letters scratched into the back, the kind someone would carve with a pin when they had no money for engraving. E.T. The air in the hall seemed to thin. Elias's face remained controlled. It always did. But inside, something flickered an image of a different star charm, decades old, hanging from a chain around a girl's neck. A girl with scraped knees and bright eyes, who used to laugh too loudly in tiny rooms. He forced his breath steady. "What do you want?" Felix pressed. Lila lifted her chin. "I don't want anything," she said. "I did what I was supposed to do. I brought it." Elias looked at her again. Rainwater still dripped from her hoodie onto his pristine marble. "You're cold," Elias said. Lila shrugged. "I've been colder." Something about that simple sentence struck him harder than it should have. It carried a history he didn't know but could imagine, and the imagining hurt. He turned slightly toward the staff woman. "Marta," he said, using her name. The word came out rough, like it hadn't been used often. The woman's eyes widened. She had worked here for 8 years, and he rarely said anyone's name. "Yes, sir?" "Please," Elias said. "A towel. And something to eat. Something simple." Marta hesitated. "Of course." Felix stepped closer. "Sir, with respect." Elias finally looked at Felix. His eyes were pale and sharp, the eyes that had ended careers with a sentence. "With respect," Elias said. "You're done speaking for now. She stays until I decide otherwise." Felix's nostrils flared. "That's not safe." Elias's voice remained calm. "My safety is not your only job, Felix." That sentence was a crack in a foundation Felix had assumed was unbreakable. Lila shifted her weight, water squelching in her shoes. "I'm not staying long," she said, and it wasn't reassurance. It was a boundary. Elias glanced down the corridor. "Come," he said, and he surprised himself by adding, "Please." He led her through halls designed to intimidate, tall doors, framed art, a silence that made even footsteps feel too loud. Lila looked around, eyes attentive but not greedy. She didn't gape at the wealth. She noticed detailed scuff marks near a baseboard where someone had bunked a cart, a crooked frame that no one had fixed, a plant that leaned toward light as if straining to escape. Elias noticed her noticing, and it unsettled him. Most people who entered his house either performed awe or masked envy. This child moved as if she were simply in a building, not in a cathedral of money. He brought her to a sitting room near the kitchen wing, smaller than the grand salons, warmed by a fireplace that was more atmosphere than necessity. A storm beat against the windows, but the glass was thick enough to reduce it to a whisper. Marta returned with a towel and a soft blanket. Lila accepted them without gratitude performance, just a nod that conveyed recognition of effort. "Take off your shoes," Marta said gently. "You'll catch your death." Lila hesitated, then bent and untied her sneakers. Her socks were damp, holes near the toes. Elias saw them and looked away too late, the image already lodged in his mind like a shard. Marta set a plate on a low table grilled cheese, cut into triangles, a bowl of tomato soup, steam rising. Not the kind of food served at Elias's dinners with executives and politicians. This was the kind of food Marta probably made for herself in the staff kitchen when no one was watching. Lila's eyes flicked to Elias. "You eat this?" Elias hadn't eaten grilled cheese in decades. "Sometimes," he lied. Layla took a bite and chewed slowly, as if testing whether the warmth was real. Then she ate like someone who had learned not to waste time when food was offered. Elias sat in an armchair across from her, hands clasped, the envelope resting on his knee like it weighed more than paper. Felix hovered near the doorway, a shadow with opinions, but Elias ignored him. Lila dipped bread into soup. "You opened it yet?" she asked. Elias's jaw tightened. "Not yet." "Good," Lila said. "Because it's not for them." Felix's voice cut in. "Who gave you that letter?" Layla didn't look at him. "Someone who's dead," she said, and the bluntness of it made the room go quiet. Elias's fingers pressed into the envelope. "Who?" he asked, voice softer. Lila swallowed. "My mom." The word mom hung in the air, heavy with what it meant. Elias felt a tightening in his chest he couldn't place. "And your mother told you to bring it here?" Elias said. Lila nodded. She didn't tell me when she was alive. She wrote it before. She told me where it was hidden. She said if anything ever happened and she couldn't come back, I had to bring it to you, no matter what. Elias's throat felt raw. Where is your mother now? Lila's eyes stayed on her soup. In the ground, she said, and there was grief there, but also a kind of practiced acceptance that made Elias's stomach turn. Children were not supposed to say it that way. Marta made a small sound, hand to her mouth. Felix shifted, uncomfortable, as if grief was a contagion. Elias held the envelope tighter. I'm sorry, he said, and he meant it in the most useless way possible. Lila looked up then, and her gaze was steady, almost adult in its directness. Sorry doesn't fix anything, she said. It just makes people feel like they did something. Elias stared at her, stunned by the clarity. He didn't know whether to feel insulted or humbled. Leila added, quieter, my mom used to say that. Elias's eyes flicked again to her wrist. The star charm swung slightly as she lifted her spoon. E.T. He felt something cold move through him. Felix cleared his throat. Sir, we can have local police come pick her up. Or CPS. This is not our responsibility. Lila's head snapped toward Felix. Don't call them, she said sharply. Felix arched a brow. Why not? Lila's jaw clenched. Because they'll put me back where I came from. Elias watched her face tighten, watched how she held herself together. Where did you come from? He asked. Lila hesitated, then said, St. Bridget's. Elias's mind pulled up images. Institutional walls, fluorescent lights, bureaucracy. He had never been inside such a place. He had donated to charities that claimed to improve them. He had written checks from a distance, the way people tossed coins into fountains without watching where they landed. And you left? Elias said. I ran, Lila corrected. I didn't leave with permission. Felix's voice sharpened. So you're a runaway. Lila's eyes flashed. I'm not a criminal, she said. I'm a kid who didn't want to sleep in a room where people scream all night. Silence again. The rain filled the gaps. Elias felt a faint tremor in his right hand and flexed his fingers to stop it. He had faced hostile takeovers, lawsuits, org revolts. None of those had made his hand shake. He glanced down at the envelope and finally made a decision. Felix, Elias said, not looking up. Leave us. Felix stiffened. Sir, now, Elias said. Felix's gaze held on Elias for a moment. Testing. Elias didn't blink. Felix turned and left, footsteps heavy with resentment. Marta lingered, uncertain. Elias looked at her. Thank you, he said again, and Marta's eyes softened as if she'd been waiting years for that word. When Marta left, the room felt smaller, warmer, more dangerous. Just Elias and Lila, and a letter sealed by a dead woman's thumbprint. Elias slid a finger under the flap and paused. Are you sure this is for me? He asked, and it came out almost like fear. Lila nodded once. My mom said your name like it hurt, she said. Then she made me promise. Elias broke the wax seal. The sound was tiny, but it felt like breaking bone. He unfolded the letter with careful hands. The paper was lined, the ink slightly smudged in places as if tears or water had touched it long ago. Elias began to read. At first, his face didn't change. His features were trained to remain neutral, to give nothing away. But his eyes moved faster across the page, then slowed. His breathing shifted, shallow and controlled, the way it did when he was trying not to show pain. Lila watched him without speaking. Spoon paused mid-her. Elias read lines that sliced through years. His name appeared in handwriting he had not seen since childhood. A name he hadn't allowed himself to say in a long time appeared too, written like an accusation. Ava. The room tilted. Elias forced himself to keep reading, each sentence tightening the invisible wire around his chest. Lila's mother wrote about a sister who had been lost. She wrote about a star charm, about a promise made to a little boy in a cramped apartment over a laundromat, about a night when authorities had come and separated them. She wrote about a system that swallowed children and called it care. She wrote about being alone, about being afraid, about giving birth and hiding the child's existence because the wrong people had already started circling. And then she wrote a sentence that made Elias's vision blur for a fraction of a second. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and she found you. Please do not punish her for my choices. The truth is ugly. The truth is that you are supposed to find me, but you built a fortress instead." Elias's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Lila shifted, voice small. "It says stuff," she said carefully, as if she didn't want to step on grief. It's about you." Elias swallowed. His voice came out rough. "How did your mother get this?" "She wrote it," Lila said. "She hid it in the lining of her old coat, the one she never threw away." Elias's eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There, in Ava's handwriting, was a final line. "The star was yours first. I kept it. I kept it so you'd remember me. I kept it so you'd come." Elias's hand went to his mouth without permission, knuckles pressing against his lips. Lila lifted her wrist, star charm glinting. "She made me wear it," she said. "She said it was important. She said it was a key." Elias stared at the charm and felt the past surge up like a flood that had been held behind a dam for decades. He saw himself at 8 years old, thin and angry, sitting on a mattress on the floor while his mother coughed in the next room. He saw Ava at 5, holding a cheap bracelet she'd found at a thrift shop, insisting it was magic because it had a star. He remembered carving E.T. into the back with the tip of a safety pin, proud that he could make letters, proud that something could be marked as his. He remembered promising Ava he would always find her. He remembered the night she disappeared. He had told himself a story for years, that she was taken, that it was out of his hands, that he couldn't have saved her, that he had done what he could by becoming a man who controlled outcomes. But the letter made the truth unavoidable. Ava had been alive. Ava had been close enough to write his name with trembling hands and put a star charm on her child's wrist and send the child into the storm to breach his gate. Elias lowered the letter slowly. His eyes were wet, but no tears fell. His body refused at release, as if crying would mean surrendering the last of his control. Lila watched him, face unreadable. "So," she said quietly, "you knew her." Elias stared at the fire, then at Lila. His voice came out like a confession scraped from stone. "She was my sister," he said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lila's eyes widened the fraction, and for the first time, her composure cracked. "My mom," she whispered, and her voice wobbled. "My mom was your sister." Elias nodded once, unable to speak further. Lila stared at the floor. "Then that makes you—" Elias's throat tightened. "Your uncle," he said. The title sounded absurd in his mouth, like wearing someone else's coat. Uncle, family. Words he had avoided by burying himself in acquisitions and steel and glass. Lila's face hardened suddenly, a defensive wall rising fast. "You didn't come," she said, and it wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Elias flinched as if struck. "I didn't know," he said. Lila's eyes flashed with something fierce. "She knew you," she said. "She knew your name. She knew where you lived. She wrote you a letter and hid it like a secret because she didn't trust the world. That means she knew you were out there, and you didn't come." Elias opened his mouth, but no justification fit. Everything he could say sounded like wealth trying to excuse absence. "I looked," he said finally, and the lie tasted bitter because it was only partly true. He had looked when he was young, when he had no resources. Later, when he had everything, he had stopped. It had been easier to believe the past was sealed. Layla wrapped her blanket tighter. "My mom worked cleaning offices," she said, voice tight. "Sometimes she cleaned buildings like yours. She'd come home with her hands all cracked, and she'd still make me grilled cheese and pretend it was fancy. She'd say rich people are just people, and then she'd get quiet and stare at the wall like she was remembering something she couldn't afford to feel." Elias's eyes burned. He could see it too clearly. Ava older, exhausted, scrubbing other people's perfection while he sat in his fortress and called it safety. Lila went on, each word controlled but sharp. "She got sick," she said. "She didn't tell me at first. Then she couldn't hide it. Then she was gone." Elias's chest tightened to the point of pain. "When?" he managed. 6 months ago, Lila said. 6 months. Ava had died while Elias sat at board meetings, signed off on layoffs, attended a gala, watched the world from behind glass. Elias's hands shook slightly. He set the letter on the table as if it might burn him. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time it sounded even more useless. Lila's eyes narrowed. "Stop saying that," she said. "If you're sorry, do something." The child's words landed like a challenge, and Elias realized with a strange clarity that this was what made her dangerous. Not threats, not ransom, not scandal. She was dangerous because she didn't care about his power. She cared about truth, and truth was the one thing Elias could not buy, schedule, or silence. The fire popped softly. Outside, rain continued, relentless. Elias drew a slow breath and looked at Lila as if seeing her properly for the first time. "Where is St. Bridget's?" he asked. 20 minutes away," Lila said. "If you drive fast." "They put me there after my mom died. My aunt tried to fight it, but she doesn't have money for lawyers. They said she wasn't stable enough. They said lots of things." Elias's eyes sharpened. "Your aunt," he said. "What's her name?" "Jenna," Lila said. "Jenna Rowan. She's my mom's friend. She's the only person who showed up at the hospital besides me." Elias felt a bitter twist. Ava's closest person was not him, not family, but a friend with no power. "How did you get here?" Elias asked. Lila shrugged. "I walked out," she said. "I took a bus, and another, and I walked from the road. I knew the name. People know your name. It's everywhere." Elias's stomach dropped. A child had navigated public transit in a storm to reach him, while his security apparatus scanned satellites for threats from billionaires and criminals. "And no one stopped you?" Elias said, more to himself. "They tried," Lila said. "But grown-ups don't pay attention when kids are quiet. If you're loud, they call you a problem. If you're quiet, they forget you exist." "I'm good at being forgotten." The sentence hit Elias like a blade. Forgotten, invisible. That was what he had built his life around preventing for himself. And he had succeeded so completely that he had made other people disappear in his orbit. He stared at her, and something shifted again, softer this time. "You're not forgotten here," he said. Lila's face remained guarded. "That's not true," she said. "Your guard at the gate forgot I was a person." Elias's jaw tightened. He pictured the guard's hand on the door latch, the contempt. A flash of anger rose, not the clean anger of business, but something more primal. Protectiveness, perhaps. Guilt wearing armor. Elias stood abruptly. Lila stiffened slightly, ready to defend herself, and he saw it how even in warmth she expected harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," Elias said, and he realized he sounded like someone trying to convince himself too. He walked to the doorway and pressed a discreet button on the wall. A moment later, Felix appeared as if he'd been waiting with his ear pressed to the door. "Sir," Felix said, eyes immediately scanning Lila again. Elias's gaze was cold. "The guard at the gate," he said, "the one who spoke to her first." "Suspend him," Felix blinked. "Sir, now," Elias said. Felix's jaw tightened. He followed procedure. Elias took a step closer. "Procedure is not permission to humiliate a child," he said. "If your procedures allow that, rewrite them." Felix's eyes hardened. "We cannot start making exceptions." Elias's voice dropped. "This house is built on exceptions. On my exception. On my wealth-making rules bend. You'll bend them now." Felix's gaze flicked to Lila and back to Elias. Something like disdain flashed and was quickly masked. "Understood," Felix said. Elias held his stare a second longer. "And Felix," he added, "if anyone from outside contacts you about this, you contact me first. No calls, no reports, no handling." Felix's mouth tightened. "Yes, sir." When Felix left, the room felt safer and more fragile at the same time. Lila watched Elias carefully. "You're mad," she said. Elias sat again slowly, as if sitting was a decision. "Yes," he said, "I am." "Not at him," Lila said, nodding toward the door. "At you." Elias's breath caught. He looked at her, and for a moment he saw Ava's expression in her face, same directness, same refusal to accept excuses. "I don't know what to do," Elias admitted, and the honesty tasted like blood. He rarely said those words. Lila dipped her grilled cheese into soup again, Calmer now. Start with letting me sleep, she said. Then call my aunt. Not those people. Elias nodded once. All right, he said. I'll call her. He stood and walked to a side table where a house phone sat unused. Elias rarely used any device that wasn't encrypted and filtered. He dialed information, then requested Jenna Rowan. The operator returned with a number. Elias stared at a moment before pressing call, as if each digit was a step into a world he had avoided. The line rang. A woman answered, voice rough with exhaustion. Hello? Jenna Rowan, Elias said. Yes, she said, suspicion immediate. Who is this? Elias glanced at Lila, who had gone still, her spoon hovering. My name is Elias Thorne, he said. Silence on the line. Then a sharp inhale. No, Jenna said, voice trembling with disbelief and anger. No, you don't get to. Lila is here, Elias interrupted, and the words cut through Jenna's fury like a blade. She came to my home. She's safe. She's warm. She's eaten. Another silence, then a choked sound. Grief and relief tangled. Oh my God, Jenna whispered. Layla, she's gone. They said she ran. They said they couldn't find her. Elias felt guilt clamp down tighter. She's here, he repeated. I need you to tell me what to do next. Jenna's voice hardened. Bring her to me, she said. Right now. Don't call them. Don't let them take her. Elias glanced at Lila. She wants to be with you, he said. Lila's eyes didn't soften, but something in her shoulders eased. Sir? Jenna said, and her voice turned sharp again. Why is she there? Elias looked at the letter on the table, then at the star charm on Lila's wrist. Because Ava sent her, he said quietly. Jenna's breath hitched. Ava, she whispered, and the name sounded like a bruise. You know Ava. She was my sister, Elias said, voice raw. Jenna's silence this time was heavier, as if decades of resentment sat in it. You didn't come, Jenna said finally, her voice low with contained rage. She waited for you. She waited, and she stopped waiting because she had no choice. Elias closed his eyes briefly. I know, he said. I can't undo that, but I can. I can do something now. Jenna's voice shook. If you're playing some rich man game, I'm not, Elias said, and he realized he meant it with his whole body. Tell me where you are. I'll bring her. Jenna hesitated, then gave an address in a small town not far away. Elias memorized it immediately. He hung up and looked at Lila. We're going to Jenna, he said. Lila's eyes narrowed. With your guards? She asked. Elias hesitated. His instinct was to surround himself with protection, but he saw the distrust in her face and forced himself to adapt. I'll drive, Elias said, surprising himself. Just me. Felix would lose his mind. The board would call it reckless. The world would call it a security nightmare. Lila studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Okay, she said. But I sit in front. Elias almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. All right, he said. Within minutes, the house moved differently. Marta found spare clothes in a guest room, closet-soft sweatpants, a hoodie that swallowed Lila's thin frame, warm socks that made her toes look small and strange. Lila accepted them without comment, changing behind a screen without needing permission. Elias went to the garage, ignoring Felix's protests that came through his earpiece like a swarm. Sir, at least allow one vehicle tail, Felix insisted. This is family, Elias said, and the word made Felix go silent. Elias chose a plain black SUV from the row of armored vehicles, something that could pass as ordinary if anyone could ignore the way it hummed with engineered quiet. He opened the passenger door for Lila, and she climbed in, buckling herself without being told. Elias slid into the driver's seat. He hadn't driven himself in years. He'd forgotten the simple weight of a steering wheel under his hands, the directness of control that wasn't outsourced. As the gate opened, rain still falling, Lila looked out the window at the lights of the estate. It's like a castle, she said, not impressed, just observing. It's a cage, Elias said before he could stop himself. Lila's head turned toward him. Yeah, she said. It looks like one. They drove down the long private road lined with trees like silent guards. The windshield wipers moved in steady rhythm, and the world beyond the glass blurred into darkness and reflections. For a long stretch, neither spoke. Elias's mind kept returning to the letter, to Ava's handwriting. He could feel it in his pocket, like a heartbeat. Lila stared out at the rain. Her fingers toyed with the star charm, rubbing it between thumb and forefinger as if it anchored her. After 10 minutes, she spoke quietly. "My mom used to tell me stories about a boy," she said. Elias's hands tightened on the wheel. "What kind of stories?" he asked, voice careful. Lila shrugged. "About a boy who promised her things," she said. "About how he would grow up and build something so big nobody could ever take anything from him." Again, Elias's throat tightened. He didn't ask how Ava described him. He was afraid of the answer. Layla added, "She said he loved her, but he was scared. She said when you get scared, you can turn into stone if you're not careful." Elias swallowed hard. Stone. He had been proud of his hardness, of his ability to endure. No one had called it what it was. Fear fossilized. "I was a child," Elias said, and it sounded like a weak defense even to him. Lila's voice stayed even. "So was she," she said. The road curved. Small town lights appeared ahead, warm and scattered. Elias followed directions to Jenna's address, a modest duplex with peeling paint, porch light flickering. A beat-up sedan sat in the driveway, and a woman stood on the porch under the overhang, arms wrapped around herself despite the shelter. Jenna Rowan was in her 40s, with tired eyes and hair pulled back hastily. She looked like someone who had fought too many battles without rest. When the SUV stopped, she rushed down the steps, rain misting her face. Layla pushed the door open and stepped out. Jenna froze for a fraction of a second, as if afraid her eyes were lying, and she surged forward and pulled Lila into her arms. Lila stiffened at first and melted slightly, her small hands gripping Jenna's jacket. Jenna's breath broke. "You scared me," she whispered fiercely into Lila's hair. "You scared me so bad." Lila's voice was muffled. "I'm sorry," she said, and Elias noticed she said it the way he did, instinctive, useless, reflexive. Jenna pulled back, gripping Lila's shoulders, scanning her face, her clothes. "Are you hurt?" Jenna demanded. Lila shook her head. "I'm fine," she said. "I ate." Jenna's eyes flicked toward Elias, who had stepped out and stood in the rain. Suddenly aware of how absurd he looked here, expensive shoes on cracked concrete. A billionaire in a neighborhood that smelled like wet pine and old cigarettes. Jenna's gaze sharpened into something close to hatred. "So," she said, voice tight, "you're real." Elias nodded once. "I'm real," he said. Jenna scoffed. "Funny," she said. "Ava used to say you were real, too, even when she stopped believing it." Elias flinched. "I can't change the past," he said. Jenna's laugh was bitter. "No," she said. "You can't, but you can stop making the present worse." Lila shifted slightly, eyes moving between them. "Jenna," she said quietly, "he's my uncle." Jenna's face tightened. "I know what he is," she snapped, then softened instantly toward Lila. "Sweetheart, go inside. Dry off. I'll be right there." Lila hesitated, then looked at Elias once, as if measuring whether leaving him outside was abandonment or justice. Then she turned and climbed the steps into the duplex, door closing behind her. Rain pattered on the porch roof. Jenna stepped closer to Elias, voice low and furious. "Where were you?" she demanded. "All those years." She struggled, "And you were on magazine covers." Elias held her gaze. "I didn't know she was alive," he said, and he heard how pathetic it sounded. Jenna's eyes glistened. "She tried," Jenna hissed. "She tried to reach you. She was scared. Not of you, of your people, of the system around you. She said she wasn't allowed near you." Elias's stomach tightened. "Not allowed," he repeated. Jenna's jaw clenched. "There were men," she said, "years ago, when she was pregnant. Men who asked questions. Men who told her it would be better if she disappeared. She thought it was your security, but she never knew for sure. She just knew that if she came too close, something bad would happen." Elias's blood went cold. He pictured Felix, his network, the private investigators he had hired over the years to neutralize threats. He pictured the way his empire moved like a living organism, protecting him without him needing to ask. Who? Elias said slowly. Told her that? Jenna's eyes narrowed. A lawyer, she said. A woman, polished, cold. Ava called her Marlin. I never got the last name. Elias felt the world sharpen, every sound crisp and cruel. Marlene Voss, his family office counsel. The woman who handled sensitive matters with the calm of a surgeon. The woman who had been with him since his first major acquisition, who had seen him through scandals and settlements, who had built legal walls as high as his physical ones. Elias's voice was very quiet. How long ago? He asked. 10 years, Jenna said. Maybe 11. Ava came home shaking. Said the lawyer told her she could ruin you, ruin everything, that she was nothing and you were everything. Ava cried for hours. Then she stopped. She got that look like she'd made a decision. After that, she never tried to contact you again. She just survived. Elias's hand curled into a fist. Did she ever mention a child? He asked, though he already knew. Jenna's eyes softened briefly. She loved Lila like oxygen, Jenna said. She would have died for that kid. And she did, in a way, working herself to bones, ignoring symptoms, because she couldn't afford to stop. Elias stared at the door of the duplex where Lila had disappeared inside, safe for the moment in a world Elias could not control with money. I want to help, Elias said, and he hated how weak it sounded compared to the harm. Jenna's laugh was harsh. Help, she repeated. You don't even know what that word means in real life. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out Ava's letter. Holding it out. She sent me this, he said. Jenna's anger faltered for a fraction. She took the paper with careful hands, as if touching Ava's handwriting might burn her. Her eyes moved across the lines, and her face shifted rage, grief, a softening that looked like pain. When she finished, Jenna pressed the letter to her chest. She was still trying, Jenna whispered. Even at the end, Elias's voice broke slightly. I don't deserve it, he said. No, Jenna said, blunt. You don't, but Lila does. So if you're going to do something, do it for her, not for your guilt. Elias nodded once, absorbing the truth. What happens now? He asked. Jenna's eyes hardened again. Now, she said, they'll come looking. St. Bridget's will file reports. Police might get involved. They'll say she's endangered. They'll say I'm unfit. They'll use paperwork to swallow her back up. Elias's gaze sharpened. Then we won't let them, he said. Jenna stared at him. You think money fixes this? She said. Elias shook his head slowly. No, he said. But I think power can, he said. And he didn't mean it as a brag. He meant it like a weapon he had forged for the wrong reasons, now repurposed. Jenna's eyes searched his face for arrogance, for savior nonsense. What she saw instead was something raw. A man realizing his fortress had been built on a graveyard of missed responsibilities. Fine, Jenna said finally, voice tight. Then prove it. Because if you fail, you don't just go back to your castle. Lila goes back to that place. Elias's jaw clenched. She won't, he said, and the certainty surprised him. Jenna stepped back. Go, she said, before she wakes up and thinks you're another grown-up who shows up and disappears. Elias hesitated, then nodded once. He turned back toward his SUV, rain soaking his hair now, cold seeping into his collar. As he drove away, he saw Lila's face in the window briefly, watching him leave, expression unreadable. It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't hope, it was assessment. Elias drove back to his estate with the weight of Ava's letter like a stone in his pocket. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, but the storm inside him had only begun. Felix met him at the garage, face tight with controlled anger. Sir, Felix said, you cannot do that again. Elias shut off the engine and stepped out. I can, Elias said, and I will. Felix's jaw flexed. This is a security catastrophe, Felix said. If anyone finds out, Elias interrupted, it will be because you failed to keep your mouth shut. Felix's eyes flashed. I'm trying to protect you. Elias stepped closer, voice low. You've been protecting the wrong thing, he said. You've been protecting my loneliness. Felix stared, thrown off balance. Sir, he said, that child could be a lever. People use children as levers. Elias's eyes went cold. Not that child, he said. Felix hesitated, then said carefully, your counsel called, Marlene Voss. She heard there was an incident. Elias's blood cooled further. She heard, Elias repeated. Felix nodded. We picked up chatter, he said. Somebody at St. Bridget's reported an unidentified vehicle near the property. Someone may have seen the gate open. It's already moving. Elias felt anger rise, clean and lethal. His machine had noticed a child's quiet arrival and already converted it into incident, chatter, moving. This was how systems crushed humans without even intending to. Get Marlene, Elias said. Felix frowned. Sir, now, Elias said. Minutes later, Elias sat in his office again, hair damp, shirt collar undone. The letter lay on his desk. The star charm's scratched initials glared in his mind like a brand. Marlene Voss appeared on the screen via secure video call, perfectly composed, hair immaculate, pearl earrings catching light. She looked like a woman who never got rained on. Elias, she said, voice smooth as polished stone. I'm hearing reports that there was an unauthorized person on your property tonight. Elias watched her face, searching for flickers. A child, he said. Marlene's lips tightened slightly. A minor, she corrected, as if child was too emotional. She came with a letter, Elias said. Marlene's eyes shifted almost imperceptibly. From whom? She asked. Elias held her gaze. From Ava, he said. The first real crack appeared so small, it could have been imagined. Marlene's blinking slowed. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Ava is deceased, Marlene said finally. Voice controlled. Elias's jaw clenched. You knew she was alive, he said. Marlene's expression smoothed. Elias, she said gently, like scolding a child, you're emotionally compromised. You have no evidence for that statement. Elias reached for a file drawer and pulled out a thin folder he hadn't opened in years, his sister's missing person file, the one he had kept out of guilt more than hope. He slammed it onto the desk. I have a letter, he said, and I have a child wearing my sister's bracelet. Marlene inhaled slowly. Where is the child now? She asked. Safe, Elias said. Not in your hands. Marlene's gaze sharpened. Elias, she said, tone shifting. This situation is volatile. If the media learns you had an unknown child on your property, the narrative becomes dangerous. Kidnapping rumors. Exploitation accusations. You need to let me handle this. Elias felt disgust coil in his stomach. Handle, he repeated. Like you handled Ava. Marlene's voice hardened slightly. You are not thinking clearly, she said. We need to contain this before it becomes inconvenient, Elias said. Marlene's jaw tightened. Before it destroys you, she said, and there was a truth there, but twisted. Your company, your shareholders, your employees. You carry responsibilities. Elias's eyes narrowed. Ava carried responsibilities too, he said. She carried a child and a job and a life you helped make harder. Marlene's face stayed composed, but her eyes cooled. If you continue down this path, she said, you may create legal exposure you can't undo. Elias leaned forward, voice low and deadly. Tell me what you did, he said. Marlene's lips pressed together. I have no idea what you're implying, she said. Elias stared at her for a long moment, then said, You're fired. The words landed like a gunshot. Marlene blinked, and for the first time, something like genuine emotion flickered surprise, then anger. Elias, she said sharply, you cannot fire me over a phone call in the middle of the night because you feel guilty. Elias's voice was calm. I can, he said, and I just did. Marlene's gaze sharpened into something colder. Then understand, she said, each word clipped, that this will not stay private. You are stepping into a legal minefield without counsel. Elias's eyes didn't flinch. Good, he said. Maybe it should explode. He ended the call without waiting for her response. Felix appeared at the door, as if he'd been listening. Sir, Felix said carefully, that was unwise. Elias stared at the rain-streaked glass. "No," he said. "What was unwise was letting people like her build my walls." Felix's jaw tightened. "We need a plan," Felix insisted. A controlled response. Elias turned, eyes sharp. "We need the truth," he said. "And we need it fast." He sat at his desk and pulled up internal records, old communications, archived legal settlements. His company's memory was infinite. Everything was saved somewhere, buried under layers of encryption, accessible only to those with the right keys. Elias had all the keys. As he dug, he found what wealth always left behind, paper trails disguised as professional language. A non-disclosure agreement from 12 years ago, signed by an A. Thorne with a shaky signature. A payment routed through a charitable foundation to a private services agency. An internal memo with Marlene's initials. Resolved, minimal risk. Subject relocated. Subject relocated. Elias's fingers went cold. He clicked deeper, unearthing attachments. Scanned forms, redacted names, case numbers. And then he found a document that made bile rise in his throat. A consent form. A consent form for temporary guardianship transfer. Signed by Ava under duress attached to a complaint accusing her of harassment, threats, instability. All fabricated, all designed to paint her as unfit. Elias's vision tunneled. He had always believed the worst thing that happened to his sister was that the system took her. Now he was seeing something worse. His system had taken her. He sat back, breathing shallow, and felt the fortress inside him begin to crack in places he had reinforced with denial. Felix stepped closer, glancing at the screen. "Sir," Felix said, voice cautious. "What is that?" Elias looked up slowly. "It's a crime," he said. Felix's face tightened. "Sir," Elias's voice cut through. "Get me a private investigator," he said. "Not one from our network. Someone external. Someone who hates people like me." Felix hesitated. "That's—" Elias stood abruptly, anger burning through grief. "Do it," he snapped. Felix finally nodded, backing away. "Yes, sir." Elias stared at the document again until the words blurred. A child's quiet knock had brought him to this point. And now he understood. This wasn't just about loneliness. It was about rot. The next day moved like a slow avalanche. By morning, St. Bridget's had contacted local police. A report existed now. A missing child, last seen at a group home, considered endangered. Jenna's phone rang repeatedly with unknown numbers. Jenna didn't answer. At Elias's estate, Felix paced, coordinating with his teams, his anxiety manifesting his activity. The house staff whispered more than usual. Marta moved through halls with a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before, as if a child's presence, even brief, had reminded her that the house could be something other than cold. Elias barely noticed the changes. He spent hours on calls, not with his usual circle of executives, but with people he rarely spoke to. A child welfare attorney recommended by someone who despised his company. A former judge who now advocated for foster kids. A nonprofit director who had refused his donations for years because she said money without accountability was insult. Each conversation stripped him. He learned quickly that his wealth could open doors, but it could also make people suspicious. Everyone assumed he wanted something PR, control, absolution. He didn't blame them. He had used money like a lever his entire adult life. Now he had to learn to use something else. Humility, persistence, discomfort. The investigator Felix hired arrived that afternoon, a woman named Tessa Marlowe, with sharp eyes and a thin scar on her chin. She wore a cheap jacket and didn't bother masking her contempt when she walked into Elias's office. "This is a nice cage," Tessa said, looking around. Elias didn't correct her. "I need you to find out what happened to my sister," he said. "Everything?" Tessa's eyebrow lifted. "People don't usually hire me for family reunions," she said. Elias slid the documents across the desk. "It wasn't a reunion," he said. "It was an extraction." Tessa read quickly, eyes narrowing, expression darkening. "This is dirty," she said. Elias's jaw clenched. "How fast can you move?" he asked. Tessa looked up. "How much of the truth can you handle?" she asked. Elias stared at her, and for once, he didn't have an arrogant answer. All of it, he said. Tessa nodded once. Then stop trying to control me, she said. You hired me because you need someone who doesn't care who you are. Elias's lips pressed together. Do your work, he said. Tessa stood, tucking the papers into her bag. I will, she said. But understand something, Thorne. If this points back to you, I won't soften it. Elias held her gaze. Don't, he said. She left without another word. By evening, Elias drove back to Jenna's duplex, alone again, the SUV feeling less like armor and more like a confessional booth on wheels. Jenna opened the door only after peering through the blinds. When she saw Elias, she didn't invite him in. She stood in the doorway like a guard. You brought trouble, Jenna said. I brought truth, Elias said, voice quiet. Jenna's eyes flicked behind him, scanning the street. No press, she said, suspicious. No one knows I'm here, Elias said. Jenna's jaw tightened. That's what Ava used to say before men showed up anyway, she snapped. Elias swallowed. Can I see Lila? He asked. Jenna's eyes hardened. Why? She demanded. So you can look at her and feel better? So you can play uncle for a week and then disappear when it gets complicated? Elias flinched. I won't disappear, he said. Jenna's laugh was bitter. You already did, she said. Elias's voice tightened. Please, he said, and it was not a word he used often. Let me speak to her. Jenna hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. 5 minutes, she said. Then you go. Inside, the duplex was small, cluttered, lived in. It smelled like laundry detergent and canned soup. Elias felt like a giant in a space built for ordinary people. Lila sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching a cartoon with the sound off. She turned her head when Elias entered, expression guarded. Elias stopped a few feet away. Hi, he said. Lila looked him over. You came back, she said. I said I would, Elias replied. Lila's eyes narrowed. Lots of grown-ups say stuff, she said. Elias nodded once, accepting it. You're right, he said. They do. Lila's fingers rubbed the star jar. Jenna says people are looking for me, she said. They are, Elias admitted. Lila's face tightened. Are they going to take me? She asked, and despite her strength, there was fear in the edges. Elias's jaw clenched. Not if I can stop it, he said. Lila stared at him. You can stop it, she said, voice flat. You're Elias Thorne. The way she said his name carried no awe. It carried expectation. Elias sat on the edge of a chair across from her, careful not to invade her space. I'm trying, he said. Lila's gaze shifted to his hands, then back to his face. My mom wanted you to know, she said quietly. She didn't want you to feel alone. The word alone hit Elias like a gentle hand on a bruise. Elias swallowed hard. I didn't deserve her kindness, he said. Layla shrugged slightly. She didn't do it for you, she said. She did it because she was tired of carrying it by herself. Elias nodded slowly. I'm sorry for what she carried, he said. Lila's eyes softened just a fraction, then hardened again. What are you going to do? She asked. Elias took a breath. I'm going to find out what happened, he said, and I'm going to make it right as much as it can be made right. Lila's voice was quiet. Nothing makes my mom alive, she said. Elias's throat tightened. I know, he said. This isn't about erasing loss. It's about not adding more. Lila studied him, then nodded once, as if filing his words away for later judgment. Jenna appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Time, she said. Elias stood. He looked at Lila again, then did something he hadn't planned. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter Ava's letter and held it out to Lila. I want you to have this, he said. Lila's eyes widened slightly. It's yours, she said. It was hers, Elias said, and she wrote it for both of us. Lila hesitated, then took it carefully, holding it like it was fragile. Her fingers trembled slightly, the first sign of vulnerability Elias had seen in her. She pressed it to her chest the way Jenna had. Elias's voice was barely audible. Good night, he said. Lila's eyes held his. Don't turn back into stone, she said. Elias's breath caught. He nodded once, then left. On the drive back, The fortress on the hill looked different to him, less impressive, more tragic. Days passed, and the quiet revolution unfolded in small, relentless ways. A social worker showed up at Jenna's door with police. Jenna stood firm, Lila behind her, chin lifted. They demanded compliance. Jenna refused to let them inside without legal representation. Elias's attorney arrived within an hour, not one of his corporate sharks, but the child welfare lawyer he'd hired, a woman named Renata Kim, who spoke with calm authority and looked social workers in the eye like they were equals, not enemies. Renata pushed for emergency kinship placement. The county resisted, arguing Elias was a stranger to Lila, that his wealth complicated matters, that media attention could harm the child. They argued Jenna's home was unstable. Elias attended the hearing in person. He walked into the family court building without his usual entourage, wearing a plain coat, his posture stiff, as if the air itself was hostile. He sat in a hard bench seat with Jenna on one side and Renata on the other. Lila sat behind them with a court-appointed advocate, small legs swinging slightly above the floor. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes, looked over her glasses at Elias. "Mr. Thorne," she said, voice skeptical. "This is highly unusual." Elias's jaw clenched. "So was my sister's disappearance," he said quietly. The judge's expression tightened. "We're here about the child," she said. Elias nodded. "Yes," he said. "And the system that failed her." The opposing counsel sneered. "Thorne is attempting to purchase custody," the lawyer said. "This child is vulnerable. She could be exploited." Lila's advocate shifted uncomfortably. Jenna's hands clenched into fists. Elias's voice remained steady. "I'm not purchasing anything," he said. "I'm taking responsibility." Too late, but not never. The judge studied him. "Your relationship to the child," she said. Elias swallowed. "Her mother was my sister," he said. "Ava Thorne." Whispers rippled through the small courtroom. Reporters weren't allowed inside, but the news would leak anyway. It always did. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Ava Thorne," she repeated, as if pulling the name from memory. "The missing child case from years ago." Elias nodded once. "Yes," he said. The judge looked at Lila, then at Jenna. "And you," she said to Jenna, "are not blood." Jenna's chin lifted. "I'm the one who showed up," she said bluntly. The judge's gaze shifted back to Elias. Thorne," she said. "You understand that if you pursue this, your life will be examined. Your resources will be scrutinized. Your past will be brought into this room." Elias's hands clenched on his knees. "Good," he said. The judge paused, then said, "We'll begin with supervised visitation and an emergency placement evaluation. No immediate custody." Jenna exhaled sharply, half relief, half frustration. Elias nodded once, accepting the limit. It was a consequence. It was reality. He could not snap his fingers and rewrite law. As they left the courthouse, Lila walked beside Jenna, then glanced at Elias. Her face was unreadable, but she held the letter tighter under her jacket. Outside, cameras waited. Someone had tipped them off. Elias froze for a fraction, the old instinct to retreat behind walls roaring back. Jenna grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her toward the car, shielding her with her body. "Don't you dare point that at her," Jenna snapped at a photographer who leaned too close. Lila's jaw clenched. She didn't hide her face. She stared directly at the crowd, eyes hard. Elias stepped forward without thinking, placing himself between the cameras and the child. A small act, but in that moment it felt like a confession. "Mr. Thorne," a reporter shouted, "is it true you have a secret niece? Is this why your sister disappeared?" Elias's mouth went dry. Felix would have handled this with threats. Marlene would have smothered it with statements. Elias stood in raw air, exposed. He glanced down at Lila, saw her shoulders tense, saw how she braced for impact. Elias lifted a hand, palm out, not in command, in protection. "No comments," Renata said firmly, ushering them forward. But the question didn't disappear. It followed Elias back to his fortress like smoke. That night, headlines began forming online, half-truths spreading like wildfire. Elias Thorne linked to missing sister. Billionaire's secret family. Runaway child at mansion. Speculation stacked on speculation until the truth became just another rumor. Elias watched the chaos unfold from his office, and for the first time, he did not call his PR team to crush it. He did not order takedowns. He did not deploy lawyers like missiles. He sat with it, because somewhere in that noise was something he couldn't ignore anymore: accountability. 2 days later, Tessa Marlowe returned with a folder thick enough to look like a weapon. She dropped it onto Elias's desk. "Your lawyer's a monster," she said. Elias's stomach tightened. "Tell me," he said. Tessa leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Ava didn't just disappear," she said. "She was pressured, threatened. A file was built to paint her unstable. It was done by private contractors tied to your company. Payment routed through shell entities. The signature on some documents looks like hers. But the conditions under which she signed were coercive." Elias's jaw clenched. "And Lila?" he asked. Tessa's expression darkened. "There's more," she said. "Lila's birth records are complicated. Your sister tried to keep her off radar. She used a different last name, but she listed a father." Elias's breath caught. "Who?" he said. Tessa slid a photocopy across the desk. Elias's eyes fell on the name. His blood went cold, because the name wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some faceless man. It was someone Elias knew. Someone close. Someone he had trusted. The father's name on the record was Julian Crown. Elias stared, mind scrambling. Julian Crown had been his first major investor, his mentor, the man who had pulled him out of poverty and into boardrooms, who had taught him how to speak like money, how to smile without warmth, how to win without flinching. Julian Crown had also died 3 years ago, celebrated as a visionary philanthropist, mourned by elites, his legacy enshrined in buildings with his name carved in marble. Elias's throat tightened. "That's impossible," he whispered. Tessa's eyes narrowed. "It's not impossible," she said. "It's just ugly." Elias's mind flashed back to Julian's dinners. The way Julian's hand would rest on Ava's shoulder when she visited the city once. How Elias had felt a flicker of irritation, but dismissed it. Ava had been young then, vulnerable, eager to belong. Elias had introduced her to his world like a trophy of survival. He had thought he was helping her. He had delivered her into a predator's orbit. Elias's hands shook. "No," he breathed, and the denial sounded like a child. Tessa's voice was flat. "Julian had connections in private adoption networks," she said. "He funded family services charities that were basically pipelines. And your lawyer, Marlene Voss, worked for Julian before she worked for you." Elias's chest tightened to pain. "So this was planned," he said. Tessa nodded once. "It looks like it," she said. "Ava got pregnant. Julian didn't want scandal. Maybe he didn't want responsibility. Maybe he wanted control. Your lawyer helped erase the problem. Ava got threatened into silence. And she got forced into signing guardianship paperwork. There's evidence she nearly lost Lila as an infant." Elias's vision blurred. His empire, his mentor, his counsel woven into a net that had caught his sister and tightened until she could barely breathe. Elias stared at the documents as if staring could change them. Tessa watched him, then said, "Here's the part you're not going to like." Elias's voice was hoarse. "Tell me," he said. Tessa slid another page forward, an old email thread, dated 12 years ago, between Marlene and Elias. Elias read the subject line and felt his stomach drop. Ava Thorne risk assessment. His own name appeared in the chain. His own replies short, cold, dismissive. Proceed. Minimize exposure. He stared at the words, mind screaming that he hadn't known what they meant. But the truth was worse. He had not asked. He had been too busy building walls to care what they were built on. Tessa's voice cut in, merciless. "You signed off on something," she said. "Maybe you didn't understand it. Maybe you did. But you participated." Elias's mouth opened, but no defense came out, because he could feel the memory. Marlene in his office years ago, calm, efficient, telling him his sister had become unstable, that she was making threats, that she could damage the company. Elias had been terrified of losing everything he'd built, terrified of being pulled back into poverty, terrified of scandal, terrified of weakness. So he had nodded. He had told himself he was protecting his work, his employees, his future. He had told himself Ava was a complication. Now the cost of that cowardice sat in a folder on his desk, named Lila. Elias's vision tunneled. He gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white. Tessa's voice softened just a fraction, not from sympathy, but from realism. If you want to do right by that kid, she said, you're going to have to burn down a lot of your own mythology. Elias stared at the rain streaking his window. The fortress outside felt suddenly suffocating. What happens if I expose this? Elias whispered. Tessa's eyes were steady. You lose control, she said. Maybe you lose your company. Maybe you face criminal exposure if prosecutors decide your proceed email matters. You definitely lose your reputation. Julian's estate gets dragged. Marlene goes down if the system doesn't protect her. Elias swallowed hard. And if I don't? He asked. Tessa's mouth tightened. Then you keep your empire, she said. And you keep living in a cage you built over your sister's bones. Elias closed his eyes. He saw Lila's face at the gate, rain-soaked, calm, knocking on bulletproof glass. He saw Ava's handwriting, the line about the fortress. He saw Jenna standing between cameras and a child. And he saw himself younger, typing proceed without asking what it meant. When he opened his eyes, something in them had changed. The coldness was still there, but it was no longer defensive. It was aimed outward at the right target. Get Renata, Elias said. Tessa's brow lifted. Now? She asked. Now, Elias said. Renata arrived within an hour, hair damp from rain, briefcase in hand, eyes sharp. She sat across from Elias and listened without interruption as he laid out what Tessa had found. When he finished, Renata was quiet for a long moment. This is explosive, Renata said finally. Yes, Elias said. Renata's gaze sharpened. You understand, she said, that if you go public with this, you're not just risking money. You're risking freedom. Elias's jaw clenched. I know, he said. Renata leaned forward. Why? She asked, voice careful. Elias didn't answer with a speech. He answered with the simplest truth. Because my sister died alone, he said, and a child knocked on my gate to tell me. If I hide now, I deserve the cage. Renata studied him, then nodded once. All right, she said. Then we move strategically. We report to appropriate authorities. We protect the child. We prepare for war. Elias's eyes were steady. Good, he said. I'm tired of peace that costs other people. The next week was a controlled collapse. Renata filed reports with state authorities. Tessa provided documentation. Elias gave sworn statements. He turned over internal emails, settlement records, shell entity trails. The story broke anyway, faster than any legal strategy could contain. It hit news outlets like a grenade. Billionaire implicated in sister cover-up. Adoption corruption linked to late philanthropist. Family office counsel accused of coercion. Missing girl's daughter emerges. Commentary exploded. Some called Elias a monster. Some called him a hero for confessing. Most treated it like entertainment. Elias watched none of it. He attended meetings with investigators, sat in sterile rooms with fluorescent lights, answered questions that made him feel stripped. For the first time in his life, he was not the one asking questions. He was being examined. His board reacted with immediate panic. In a sleek conference room at Thorne Systems headquarters, 12 directors sat around a glass table, faces tight. Elias stood at the head without sitting, as if sitting would signal weakness. The interim chair, a man named Calvin Hargrove, spoke first. Elias, Calvin said, voice clipped, this is a catastrophe. Elias didn't blink. It's a consequence, he said. Calvin's jaw tightened. Share price is already down 15%. He said. Major clients are calling. Regulators are circling. Elias nodded once. Good, he said. A murmur rippled around the table, disbelief and anger. One director, a woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Are you trying to destroy the company? She demanded. Elias's gaze was steady. No, he said. I'm trying to stop it from destroying people. Calvin slammed a hand on the table. This is not the time for moral theater, he snapped. You handed ammunition to every enemy we have. Elias's voice stayed calm. My sister wasn't ammunition, he said. She was a person. Calvin's nostrils flared. Your personal guilt is irrelevant, he said. Your job is to protect this organization. Elias took a slow breath. I protected it, he said quietly, for years. At a cost I pretended not to see. Calvin leaned back, eyes cold. Then you leave us no choice, he said. We're convening a vote. Temporary suspension of your CEO duties pending investigation. The words landed like a guillotine. In the past, Elias would have fought. He would have threatened. He would have maneuvered. Now he felt something else. Relief, bitter and sharp. Do it, Elias said. The room went still. Calvin blinked. Elias, he said cautiously, you're agreeing? Elias nodded once. Yes, he said. Suspend me. Remove me if you want, but you will not bury this. Not in my name. The director stared, unsettled by the absence of his usual control. Calvin's voice hardened. You're handing the company to people who don't care about your newfound conscience, he said. Elias's eyes narrowed. Then I should have built it differently, he said. And that's on me. He turned and walked out before they could speak again, leaving his empire's control behind like a coat he no longer wanted. Outside the building, cameras waited again, hungry. Elias stepped into the open air and felt the weight of public gaze crash against him. He didn't flinch. He simply got into his car and drove to Jenna's duplex. This time, Jenna didn't make him stand outside in the rain. She let him in, not because she forgave him, but because the storm had become too big for pride. Lila sat at the table, doing homework, pencil moving steadily. She looked up when Elias entered. He stopped a few feet away and said, I told the truth. Lila's pencil paused. What truth? She said. Elias's throat tightened. About your mom, he said. About what happened. About my part in it. Lila stared at him, eyes narrowing. Your part? She repeated. Elias nodded once. Yes, he said. Jenna's arms crossed. You just set your life on fire, she said. Elias nodded. Yes, he said again. Lila's gaze sharpened, suspicious. Why? She said. Elias's voice was quiet. Because if I don't, he said, I keep living like none of it mattered. Like she didn't matter. Like you don't matter. Lila's eyes flicked down to her star charm, then back up. You could have just taken me, she said bluntly. With lawyers. With money. People do that. Elias swallowed. I could have tried, he said. But that would have been another theft. Another person using power to move you like an object. Lila's jaw tightened. So now you're... What? She said. Trying to be good? Elias didn't answer with a polished line. He answered honestly. I'm trying to be real, he said. Lila stared at him for a long moment, then looked back down at her homework. Real people mess up, she said quietly. Elias's chest tightened. Yes, he said. Lila's pencil resumed moving. Then don't mess up me, she said, voice small but firm. Elias's eyes burned. I won't, he said, and he knew it would take more than words. Over the next months, Elias's life became unfamiliar. He moved out of his estate, not because it was required, but because he couldn't breathe there anymore. The fortress felt like a monument to absence. He rented a small house closer to town, modest by any standard, but shocking for a billionaire. It had thin walls. He could hear wind. He could hear neighbors' dogs. At first, the noise made him tense. Then it started to feel like life. He attended supervised visits with Lila in a community center room decorated with faded posters. A court monitor sat in the corner with a clipboard, watching him like he might spout horns. Elias accepted it. Lila didn't rush into his arms. She didn't call him uncle like a movie. She sat across from him and drew pictures, sometimes offering him a crayon without looking up. Elias learned to sit in silence without filling it with money or solutions. One day, Lila slid a drawing toward him. It was of a house with tall walls and a small stick figure outside. The stick figure held a star. Inside the walls was another stick figure, alone. Elias stared at it, throat tight. Lila spoke without looking up. That was you, she said. And that was my mom. Elias's voice was barely audible. Yes, he said. Lila added, "This is you now," and she slid another drawing over. In this one, the walls were broken, pieces scattered like rubble. The stick figure from inside stood outside now, holding a broom, sweeping up the mess. The other stick figure was gone, but a smaller stick figure stood near him holding the star. Elias's eyes blurred. He didn't wipe them. He let the tears come quietly, a private surrender. The court monitor shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to notice. Layla glanced up then, expression guarded. "Don't cry too loud," she said. "People get weird when grown-ups cry." Elias let out a small sound that might have been a laugh if his throat wasn't tight. "All right," he said. Layla returned to her drawing. "You can cry a little," she allowed, like granting permission. Elias nodded, humbled by the fact that a child who had every right to hate him was teaching him how to be human. The investigation into Marlene Voss and Julian Crown's estate moved through legal channels like thick sludge. Marlene denied everything at first, then shifted tactics, blaming Julian, blaming Ava, blaming miscommunication. Evidence stacked anyway, payments, contracts, threats documented by other victims, who began coming forward when Elias's confession made them brave enough to speak. Elias became a lightning rod. Protesters gathered outside Thorne Systems. Some carried signs calling him a monster. Others carried signs calling him a liar. Some demanded his resignation. Some demanded his arrest. Elias didn't hide. He testified before a state committee on foster system corruption, sitting under bright lights while politicians postured. He spoke plainly, not to perform redemption, but to expose mechanisms. He admitted his complicity. He admitted the moment he chose proceed. His voice didn't shake when he said it, but his hands clenched under the table. The hearing went viral. People dissected his expressions like entertainment. He didn't watch. After, Renata pulled him aside. "You're making yourself a target," she warned. Elias nodded. "I deserve it," he said. Renata's eyes sharpened. "Deserve isn't the point," she said. "The point is Lila. Don't get so caught in punishment that you forget the living child." Elias's breath caught. He nodded once. "You're right," he said. He learned that accountability wasn't just confession. It was consistency. He showed up to every visit, every hearing, every meeting. He listened when Jenna yelled at him. He listened when Lila went quiet and withdrew. He didn't demand forgiveness. He didn't demand affection. He simply stayed. One afternoon, after a supervised visit, Lila walked with him to the parking lot, Jenna trailing behind with crossed arms. Lila stopped near Elias's car and looked up at him. "Do you miss her?" she said, and the way she said it carried something fragile. Elias's throat tightened. "Every day," he said. Lila's eyes flicked away. "I miss her too," she said, voice small. Elias nodded, not reaching for her, not making it about himself. "I know," he said. Lila's fingers rubbed her star charm. "She used to hum when she cleaned," she said, like she had a song stuck in her throat. Elias's breath caught. "She hummed when she was little," he said, and his voice wavered. "When she was scared, she'd hum to make the room feel less empty." Lila looked back up, eyes wide. "She did that with me," she whispered. Elias nodded, tears burning. "Then she didn't forget," he said. Lila swallowed hard. "Sometimes," she said, voice shaky, "I get scared she forgot me when she died." Elias's chest tightened painfully. He crouched slightly, bringing himself lower, careful. "She didn't forget you," he said, voice steady despite the ache. "She made a plan. She made you a promise. She sent you here with a star. People who forget don't do that." Layla's lips trembled. She looked like she might collapse into him for a second. Then she stepped back, catching herself, pride and fear holding her upright. Jenna watched, eyes tight, fighting her own grief. Elias stood slowly. "I'll see you next time," he said. Layla nodded once. "Yeah," she said. Then, after a beat, "Don't get arrested." Elias let out a breath that turned into a small laugh, painful and real. "I'll try," he said. Layla turned and walked to Jenna's car, shoulders squared like armor. As the months wore on, the court shifted from supervised visitation to unsupervised, then to trial placements. Elias spent weekends with Layla under strict guidelines. Jenna remained the primary guardian for now, but Elias was being evaluated as kinship placement. During the first weekend, Lila came to Elias's small rental house. She stood in the doorway and looked around, suspicious. "This is your house?" she said, voice flat. Elias nodded. "For now," he said. Lila narrowed her eyes. "It's normal," she said, like the word tasted strange. Elias nodded again. "Yes," he said. Lila stepped inside slowly, scanning. The living room had a couch with a blanket folded on it, a small table with a bowl of apples, a bookshelf with kids' books Renata insisted he buy. The kitchen had fingerprints on the fridge, because Elias hadn't wiped them immediately. The air smelled like soup, because Elias had tried to cook. Lila turned toward him. "You made this?" she said, pointing to a pot on the stove. Elias hesitated. "I tried," he admitted. Lila peeked in, sniffed. "It smells like something died," she said. Elias winced. "I'm learning," he said. Lila nodded as if that was acceptable. "Good," she said. "Because if you try to buy a chef, Jenna will call you a coward." Elias's mouth twitched. "Noted," he said. Lila walked to the table and saw a stack of paper and pencils. "What's that?" she said. Elias swallowed. "I thought—" "If you wanted to draw," he said. Lila's expression softened slightly, then hardened again quickly, as if softness was dangerous. "Okay," she said, and she sat down, immediately taking a pencil as if claiming space. Elias watched her for a moment, then moved to the stove, stirring the soup with cautious determination. It was a small scene, painfully ordinary, and it felt more intimate than any gala. That night, Lila refused to sleep in the guest room at first. She stood in the doorway, eyes sharp. "It's too quiet," she said. Elias nodded. "Yes," he said. Lila's jaw clenched. "Quiet feels like something bad is about to happen," she admitted, voice low. Elias felt his chest tighten. "We can leave a light on," he offered. Lila nodded once. "And the door stays open," she said. "Of course," Elias said. She climbed into bed, still wearing her star charm. Elias stood awkwardly by the door, unsure what to do with this moment. Lila glanced at him. "You can go," she said. Elias nodded. "Good night," he said. As he turned, Lila's voice stopped him. "Elias," she said. He looked back. Lila hesitated, then said, "If you get mad, you have to say it, not just get cold. Cold is worse." Elias's throat tightened. He nodded once. "All right," he said. Lila watched him for a beat, then turned her face to the pillow, done with vulnerability. Elias stepped out and left the door open, light spilling into the hall. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet, realizing that for years he had paid millions to maintain silence, and now silence was the thing that scared a child. The next morning, Lila woke early and wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Elias was already up, making toast. Layla stared at him. "You don't sleep," she said. Elias shrugged. "Not well," he admitted. Lila climbed onto a chair. "My mom didn't sleep well either," she said softly. She'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, like she was listening for something. Elias's throat tightened. "She was," he said quietly. Lila watched him spread peanut butter on toast. "You gonna do that forever?" she asked. Elias glanced at her. "What?" he said. "Be awake," she said. "Be scared," she added bluntly. Elias exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "I'm going to learn how not to." Lila nodded, as if that was a plan she could accept. "Good," she said. Then she added, almost casually, "Jenna says you're getting sued." Elias almost choked. "Jenna talks to you about lawsuits?" he said. Lila shrugged. "Jenna talks about everything," she said. "She says it's better than secrets." Elias felt a tight smile. "She's right," he said. Lila bit into her toast. "Are you going to lose your money?" she asked. Elias paused. In the past, that question would have terrified him. Now, the fear felt smaller than the shame. "Maybe some of it," Elias said honestly. Lila chewed thoughtfully. "Okay," she said. "Money's boring." Elias let out a surprised laugh, real this time. "Is it?" he asked. Lila nodded, mouth full. "Yeah," she said. "It can't hug you, and it can't make grilled cheese taste better. unless you buy better cheese. And even then, it's still just cheese. Elias stared at her, then shook his head slightly, amused and devastated at once. That's true, he said. The legal storm intensified. Julian Crown's estate lawyers fought back aggressively, trying to protect the dead man's legacy. They accused Elias of defamation, of manipulation, of using the scandal to distract from corporate issues. They painted Ava as unstable, dredging up old fabricated reports. Marlene Voss was arrested on charges related to coercion and fraud, but she posted bail quickly, appearing outside the courthouse in a tailored coat, face unreadable, eyes like knives. When reporters asked her about Ava, she said, "Tragic misunderstandings happen when emotionally unstable individuals refuse help." Saw the clip and felt something cold and clear settle in him. Marlene wasn't just a villain. She was the embodiment of the system, polished, plausible, protected. To fight her, Elias had to do something he had never done willingly. He had to expose his own empire's machinery. He released internal reports showing how private contractors had been used to silence risks. He opened his archives to investigators. He allowed audits that revealed other settlements, other minimized exposures, other human costs. Each revelation hurt him financially. Investors fled, partners distanced. The board formally removed him as CEO and installed an interim leadership team. Elias watched his stock-based wealth shrink. Numbers fell like sand through fingers. For the first time since he was a child, Elias felt the old fear of poverty creep in at the edges. The fear that had driven him, fueled him, turned him into stone. He sat alone in his rental house one night, lights off, watching the glow of the street lamp through thin curtains. His phone buzzed with notifications he didn't open. He thought of his mother coughing in the next room when he was 8, a sound like a clock ticking down. He thought of promising Ava he would never be powerless again. He thought of the irony. He had become powerful enough to crush her. A knock sounded at his front door. Elias froze, heart jumping, body bracing the way it had in his childhood when knocks meant trouble. Then he remembered he lived in a normal neighborhood now, where knocks could mean neighbors, not raids. He stood and opened the door. Lila stood there with Jenna behind her, both holding grocery bags, rain misting their hair. Elias blinked, stunned. "What?" he began. Jenna pushed past him without waiting for invitation. "Your fridge is probably empty," Jenna said. "You look like you eat sadness for dinner." Elias's mouth opened, then closed. Lila walked in, scanning the living room. "You look like you're turning into stone," she said bluntly. Elias swallowed. "I'm having a day," he admitted. Jenna snorted. "Welcome to everyone else," she said. Lila put a grocery bag on the counter and pulled out a box of grilled cheese ingredients, like she was unloading weapons. "We're making food," she announced. "Because you're not allowed to become a statue." Elias stared, throat tight. "You didn't have to come," he said. Jenna's eyes narrowed. "No," she said. "We didn't. We chose to." Lila glanced at him. "My mom would be mad if I let you sit alone and rot," she said, voice quiet. She was nice like that. Elias's chest tightened painfully. He nodded once. "Okay," he said. They cooked in his small kitchen, Jenna barking instructions, Lila stirring soup, Elias chopping vegetables with awkward concentration. The scene was messy, loud, human. At one point, Elias dropped a spoon, and it clattered on the tile. The sound startled him. He flinched slightly, then forced himself to breathe. Lila noticed. She didn't comment. She just slid the spoon back toward him without looking up, a small act of quiet care that felt like forgiveness's first cousin. After they ate, Jenna leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So," she said, "you really did it." Elias swallowed. "Did what?" he asked. Jenna's eyes held his. "You told the truth," she said. "You burned your own throne." Elias nodded once. "Yes," he said. Jenna's gaze softened a fraction. "Ava would have wanted that," she said quietly, and it was the closest thing to approval she had ever given him. Elias's eyes burned. "I wish I'd done it sooner," he whispered. Jenna's jaw clenched. "Me too," she said. "But wishing doesn't fix the past. So keep doing the work." Lila hopped down from her chair and walked up to Elias, stopping just close enough that he could feel her presence. She held out her star charm, dangling it in front of him. "This is still yours," she said. Elias's throat tightened. "It was Ava's," he said. Lila shook her head slightly. "She said it was yours first," she said, "but she kept it. Then she gave it to me. So it's like," she struggled for words, "like it's all of ours." Elias stared at the charm, then slowly, carefully, reached out and touched it with one finger. The metal was warm from Lila's skin. He felt something in him soften, not into weakness, but into connection. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. Lila nodded once, as if thanking was not the point. Then she stepped back, satisfied. Weeks later, the major confrontation came. Marlene Voss's trial began, and Elias was subpoenaed as a witness. He sat on the stand in a packed courtroom. Reporters lined outside. Lila was not allowed inside, but Jenna sat in the back row, her presence a steady weight. Marlene sat at the defense table, composed, eyes fixed on Elias with a cold familiarity. When Elias testified about the proceed email, about the fabricated reports, about Ava's coerced signatures, the courtroom held its breath. Then Marlene's attorney stood and asked, voice dripping skepticism, "Mr. Thorne, isn't it true that you benefited from these actions?" Elias swallowed. "Yes," he said. A murmur rippled. The attorney pressed, "Isn't it true that your company's success depended on minimizing risks like your sister?" Elias's jaw clenched. "Yes," he said again. Jenna's hand clenched in her lap. The attorney leaned in. "So why should anyone believe you now?" he demanded. "Why should anyone believe this isn't a performance to save yourself?" Elias stared at the attorney, then glanced at Marlene. Marlene's lips curved slightly, as if she expected him to flinch, to retreat, to hide behind technicalities. Elias took a slow breath. "Because a child knocked on my gate," he said quietly, "in the rain, with a letter from my sister. And I realized my empire was built to keep out the very people I owed everything to." The judge banged the gavel lightly. "Keep your answers to facts," she warned. Elias nodded. "The fact is," he said, voice steady, "I participated in a system that harmed my sister. And I'm telling the truth now, because there is no other way forward that doesn't continue the harm." Marlene's eyes narrowed. Then, for the first time, she spoke directly, cutting through procedure with a cold, controlled voice. "You're enjoying this," she said, and the courtroom stilled at her audacity. "You're enjoying pretending you're different now. You're the same boy who wanted power. You're the same man who signed off on silencing problems." Elias looked at her and felt the old fear rise. The fear of being exposed as exactly what she said. He could have denied it. He didn't. "You're right," Elias said, voice calm. "I wanted power. I used it wrong. And I'm standing here because I refuse to use it wrong again." Marlene's composure cracked just slightly, her eyes flashing with something like rage. Elias continued, voice steady. "You told my sister she was nothing," he said. "You told her the world belonged to men like Julian and me. You built a story where wealth equals worth." He paused, then added, "That story ends now." The courtroom went silent. Marlene leaned back, lips pressed tight, eyes cold. Elias stepped down from the stand, feeling stripped and strangely lighter. Outside the courthouse, cameras surged. Reporters shouted. Felix was nowhere now. The fortress staff was gone. Elias stood in open air with no shield but his own choices. Jenna met him on the steps, face tight. "You did it," she said. Elias exhaled shakily. "Yes," he said. Jenna nodded toward the street corner, where a small figure waited under an awning. Lila stood there, hood up, star charm visible against her jacket. She watched Elias with wide eyes. Elias walked toward her slowly. Lila didn't run into his arms. She didn't cry. She just looked up at him and said, "Did you tell the truth?" Elias swallowed. "Yes," he said. "The ugly part?" Lila nodded once, satisfied. "Good," she said. Then she added quietly, "My mom would be proud." Elias's eyes burned. He nodded, unable to speak. Layla stepped closer, and for the first time, took his hand. Her fingers were small, warm, real. The quiet revolution had never been loud. It had been this, a small hand choosing connection without surrendering dignity. The consequences kept coming. Thorne Systems faced investigations and lawsuits. Elias's personal fortune shrank further as he funded legal settlements for victims of coercive adoption networks linked to Julian Crown's charities. He established an independent foundation, not in his name, but in Ava's run by people who had lived through the system, not by elites who wrote checks from distance. He sold the estate. The fortress on the hill went to a public trust, converted into a residential rehabilitation center and legal aid hub for families fighting child removal. Marta stayed on, not as a servant, but as a paid community coordinator, the marble halls filled with voices, footsteps, life. When Elias walked through it months later, he heard children laughing where silence used to sit like dust. It hurt and healed him at once. Some called it redemption. Others called it optics. Elias didn't care what strangers called it, because he knew the truth. Nothing could resurrect Ava. Nothing could erase the years of abandonment. But repair was still possible, not as a clean story, but as a messy, ongoing act. On the day the court finalized a long-term kinship plan, Jenna retained guardianship with shared custody provisions that allowed Elias significant involvement. It wasn't the fantasy ending where the billionaire simply gets the child. It was reality, oversight, conditions, therapy requirements, continued evaluations. Elias accepted every condition without complaint. Outside the courtroom, Jenna exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time in months. Lila stood between them, clutching Ava's letter in her backpack like a relic. Jenna looked at Elias. "This doesn't make you a hero," she said bluntly. Elias nodded. "I know," he said. Jenna's eyes softened a fraction. "But it makes you present," she said, and the word carried weight. Leela glanced up at Elias. "You still have to learn how to make soup," she said. Elias let out a small laugh, relieved by the ordinariness. "I will," he promised. Leela nodded once. "Good," she said. Then she pulled the letter out of her backpack and held it between them. "We should put it somewhere safe," she said. Elias's throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "Somewhere we can see it." They drove afterward not to the fortress, but to the small rental house. Jenna came too, still suspicious, still protective, but less combative now. Inside, Lila walked to the living room wall where Elias had hung a single framed photograph, an old, faded picture Tessa had found in archives. Ava as a child, missing tooth grin, star bracelet on her wrist, arms slung around Elias's skinny shoulders. Lila stood in front of it, staring. Elias watched her, heart aching. Lila looked back at him. "She looks happy," she said quietly. Elias swallowed. "She was," he said. "Before the world got heavy." Lila nodded slowly. "We can make it less heavy," she said, and it wasn't a promise of magic. It was a plan. Elias's eyes burned. "Yes," he said. "We can." Lila handed him the letter. "Frame it," she said, "so you don't forget again." Elias took it with careful hands. "I won't forget," he said. Lila's eyes narrowed, skeptical. "Don't just say it," she said. "Do it," Elias nodded once. "I will," he said. Later that night, after Jenna left and Lila settled into the guest room with the door open and the light on, Elias sat alone in the living room. He held Ava's letter in his hands, rereading her words, letting them carve new pathways in him. Outside, rain began again, soft against the window. Elias listened, not with fear this time, but with awareness. He thought of the gate, the bulletproof glass, the child's knock. He thought of the empire he had built, designed to keep out unpredictability, designed to keep out pain, designed to keep out need. And he realized that what he had called safety had been a prison. Ava had seen it. Lila had named it. Jenna had challenged it. The quiet revolution had not been a grand gesture. It had been a series of small choices that demanded real cost. He had lost his title. He had lost his control. He had lost the illusion that he could separate his success from other people's suffering. But he had gained something he hadn't known how to want. Connection. Not the kind that flattered him. The kind that held him accountable. A soft sound came from the hallway. Elias turned and saw Lila standing there in her socks, hair messy, eyes half asleep. Elias stood quickly. Are you okay? He asked. Lila shrugged. I couldn't sleep, she said. It's too quiet. Elias nodded, understanding. Do you want? He paused, unsure. Do you want me to sit in the hallway? He offered. So you know someone's there. Lila's eyes narrowed slightly. Then she nodded once. Okay, she said. But don't talk. Elias nodded. I won't, he said. He sat on the floor outside her room, back against the wall, legs stretched out awkwardly. Lila crawled back into bed, watching him for a moment. Before she turned away, she said quietly, My mom would have liked you like this. Elias's throat tightened. I wish she could have seen it, he whispered. Lila's voice was sleepy, but firm. Then keep doing it, she said. So it counts. Elias nodded once. I will, he said. Lila turned her face to the pillow. After a beat, her breathing slowed. Elias sat in the dim hallway light, listening to the soft rhythm of a child sleeping. He thought of Ava humming to make the room feel less empty. He thought of the star charm, passed down like a fragile torch. He thought of the fortress now filled with voices. The rain continued outside, steady and quiet, like a reminder that storms didn't always break things. Sometimes they washed away dust that had been sitting too long. Elias rested his head back against the wall and let himself feel the exhaustion, the grief, the consequences. He did not reach for a phone to control the world. He did not retreat behind stone. He stayed, and in that simple, stubborn act, the lonely empire began to reshape itself, not into a monument to one man's fear, but into something messier, louder, warmer. A place where a child's knock could be answered. A place where the cost of solitude was finally paid. A place where true wealth meant shared humanity, earned day by day, without shortcuts, without magic, and without forgetting.